Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Being Real. If you guys are new to the podcast, this is a podcast where I just let you guys in on what's going on in my life and just being blunt and honest about things that are good, things that are hard, things that are real, and inviting you guys in it to have a space where you can feel seen, heard, and loved as God intended. So thanks for listening. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. Hope you guys are having a good day. There's kind of like a heat wave that went through the Midwest, and I say heat wave meaning like 70-degree weather compared to like the 30s and negative 30s that we've been having. So hope y'all are enjoying that. Fly a kite, walk your dog, go on a run, go on a walk, go on a picnic. But yeah, enjoy the weather. I love springtime. Spring and summer are probably my favorite seasons just because spring is such a good mix of seasons and temperatures, and there's just so many fun activities that you can do in the spring. I love just getting a hammock outside and just enjoy the breeze and see the green grass growing. It's just so nice. I'm back in a sweatshirt. It's getting cold again. Not a fan. But anyways, hope you guys are having a good day. This morning I actually got up at 4:30 and went on a run at 5:30. So love that. Kind of came about randomly and very purposeful. Basically, I went on a run the other day, and as I was heading back, there were these two other ladies that were also on the run, and they're like, hey, you should join us. One of the other girls who was running also ran. Oh, there's a fly in here. I hope it doesn't get in the middle of the camera. It probably will. But she basically ran at the same university that I ran at, and so that was pretty cool. So we just kind of talked about that, and I was like, what do you guys do? You're part of a running club? And they're like, we kind of just meet in the mornings. So I joined them for a run, and it was so fun. They actually were pushing me pretty hard. We were going like super far. We went like maybe 8 miles, which isn't technically super far to some people's standards, but to me, I've been only doing maybe like 4 to 5 miles per day or something like that just to kind of maintain fitness. So 8 miles was pretty humbling to say the least, but we maintained a pretty good smooth pace as well, so that was nice. It was just nice to meet other runners that are pushing themselves and just kind of in this training block of just trying to enjoy running and finding different ways to love it. There's another girl who is in PT school, so similar age group to me. Obviously I'm graduated, but she's kind of around that age group, but she's doing the half marathon, and I was like, I'll do a half marathon. I'm gonna start training for a half marathon. So, yeah, excited about that. I've learned I'm the type of person that needs to have some sort of objective or goal as far as training goes. I need to have something to work for and to strive for. And sometimes that looks like having a race. And so especially with running and maintaining fitness with running, I've realized that I need to maintain fitness through training for a race. And I need to just be racing, whether it's half marathons, marathons. That's the farthest distance I will go, you guys. I don't think I could be doing 100-mile. Those people are insane, and I have a ton of respect for them, but I don't know if I would have the patience for it, to be completely honest with y'all. I have a ton of respect for those that do train for ultras, but I don't know if that's for me, to be honest. But I'm excited about training for half. It'll be my second, like in the marathon category, my second marathon-ish type of race. Obviously, I've done like the full marathon, so I'm excited to be able to do something like a long distance race again. But yeah, we're moving into Lent season. Lent started on Wednesday. With Lent, I wanted to kind of just hop on here and talk about things that I've learned so far. It hasn't been that long since Lent has started. I've just already been learning so much from the time that's passed since Lent has started. I wanted to hop on here and share things that God's been revealing to me, things that I've been able to process myself that I'm learning, and just things that I've been noticing so far. I feel like Lent is this thing, when you think about it, you automatically think of the Catholic faith. I'm not Catholic. I wasn't raised Catholic, but I do have a lot of respect for what Lent teaches. I think of Lent as something that reminds us of what Christ suffered in before he was crucified. And I think whenever we deny our flesh, it almost acts as us taking part in our own form of suffering. It's obviously not to the same extent as him being crucified. That is way different than, not eating sweets for 2 months. It's not even close. But I look at it as whenever Christ was leading up to that point of crucifixion, he was constantly leaning on God. There is a moment I think it's in John. I don't know if it might be in John, where he is literally asking God if it is his will that he doesn't sacrifice himself for our sins, but if it is, he trusts in him. And I remember he was like, let this cup pass from me if it is your will. I remember he was talking about how he was like sweating blood, which is an actual human response too, which shows Christ's humanity. But I think it's just kind of I don't want to use the word cool because I feel like that waters down what Lent really is, but I feel like it is such a symbol and a practice that we can do as a way to resemble, in a way, what Christ did for us. I look at it as a way that we can lean on God when something is hard to get us through it and to also teach us things through that as well. It's a constant denying ourselves, denying the enemy, denying the world, denying our flesh, and when we're denying, we're receiving Christ constantly. Our salvation isn't like getting a diploma from graduating. It's not something that's set in stone after working towards something for years. It's something that you are constantly being refined through. You're constantly choosing God because life changes. The only one who doesn't is God. And when we rely on God through the things that are changing, we are being refined. We are denying our flesh. And with that, we are becoming more and more like Christ by choosing God over other things that might seem a little bit more appealing in the moment. The reason they seem appealing is because the enemy is such a good con artist. He literally will paint things to be so appealing to the point that we give into it and it destroys us to every bit of ourselves. I was actually talking with one of my friends today and she was expressing how she struggles with her relationship with food in the sense of overeating. That's something that a lot of people struggle with. Personally, I struggle on the opposite end of sometimes I struggle with getting myself to eat, and that's from my past of my eating habits and behaviors that I'll talk about in a separate episode a little bit more in depth. But I basically had disordered eating habits to where I convinced myself that I couldn't have food and I treated food as a punishment, and I looked at food as something that would make me fat, just to be blunt of how I thought about it, when in reality food is something that should nourish and fuel us. That's how God intended it to be. And my friend was saying how she's the opposite, where it's a way to relieve stress, it's a way to take your mind off something and just kind of an impulse. There is psychology to how we are raised and just little things that can create that impulse, whether it's kind of my situation of refusing food and being scared of food and abusing food and using it as an impulse, as a distraction from the world around us. And I think it's super interesting. Now, when you think about the idea of Lent and denying ourselves, it's not just with the idea of food, but we are in control of saying no to those desires and those impulses. I'm capable of controlling my response to wanting to eat and to not eat. I think that is something we need to remind ourselves of, is we have the ability to control whether we say yes or no to a desire that is within us. When we remember that we have control over those decisions, we remember that we also have control over the enemy. I also was telling her how basically the enemy is so sneaky and deceptive, and how he sneaks into our thought life and how he sneaks into our desires and things that we are seeking, that he will look for little gaps within us and basically weave his way in so that he creates these temptations and things that'll pull us away from Christ and suck us into the world and suck us into our own flesh and desires. What happens when we're sucked into our own flesh and desires over Christ? Well, like I said, everything's changing. Our bodies are changing. Our world is changing. The thing that isn't is Christ. That's the only thing that's sustainable, the only thing that'll fill us. So whenever we choose the thing which is ourselves, it's not making us more full. It's just making us more empty. I've been convicted of that myself because I personally struggle with areas of materialism and shopping. I'm not going to the mall and dropping a few $100s on clothes or anything, but I go to the thrift store and I come home with something. Do I need something? No. But it's that lack of contentment in certain areas of me trying to fill a God-sized hole with a piece of clothing, and obviously that's not going to do it. It's like trying to fill a quarry with a bucket of water. That's not going to fill the quarry. That's a bucket of water. You got to make the infinite water source in Minecraft to be doing that, and you'd be there for hours and hours, and even then it wouldn't be full. You would probably be there your whole life trying to fill that quarry with a bucket of water. So I know that's kind of a weird weird example, analogy, whatever. Point is, we can't fill a God-sized hole in our heart with material things or things of this world or our own fleshly desires, because they will just suck us dry. I think about the idea of Lent with the verse. I wrote it down and I took notes. So if I look down, that's what I'm doing. So there's also this article that this guy was talking about his perspective on Lent, and it was also pretty interesting. He was saying that he chooses not to practice Lent because he views it as being religious and this only season of time that we deny ourselves, and when in reality we should be doing that daily. I agree with that perspective, but my view of Lent is, yes, we should deny ourselves. Luke 9:23 says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Obviously, we should pick up our cross, which is whatever is pulling us away from God, whatever is feeding our flesh, and deny it daily. That shouldn't be something that is only during Lent. I think Lent is a remembrance that even Christ himself came to God when he was struggling. He suffered through temptation when he was in the woods from fasting, and he asked God every day to help him deny his flesh. And obviously Jesus is perfect, and so he didn't lean into those temptations, but we are not. Because we are not perfect, we need God even more. So it just shows that through how Christ even needed God and he relied on him daily. We need to rely on him daily. But Lent is a reminder of how Christ sacrificed so much for us, that it gives us a little bit more of a motivation to sacrifice something even deeper and to really focus and be convicted and to be humbled. I think the enemy strikes even more during Lent season for the reason that there are so many Christians in our world that practice it, that he knows that and he attacks even more. I feel like I struggle with my own flesh desires more in Lent than I do every single day, for the reason that he knows that I'm constantly trying to refuse him and I'm trying to lean on God even more, and he hates that. I just think that's super interesting. As I mentioned earlier, I struggle with the idea of finding contentment in material items such as clothes, my style. I mentioned that in the last episode of just the idea of what's my motivation when it comes to my style? Where is that in my heart? I was talking about the idea of the style stress in our world, where there's the expectation of what we should wear versus what we actually want to and how we express ourselves. But I also think that for me, I just struggle with it, as it is something that I feel a lot of joy whenever I do wear a good outfit, and I feel a lot of joy when I do get a new piece of clothing, because it's kind of like that reward system of, oh, I get dopamine when I get something new. It is like you receive something physical, so your brain receives dopamine, where obviously when you receive Christ, there's constant dopamine. That's a constant gift, but it's harder to remember that than when you see like a present in front of you and you open it. The dopamine you probably get from that versus daily, whenever it's hard to remember Christ, is so different. And it's because it's something right in front of you that's easy to see versus something that's harder to see. And I think it's kind of our human nature to rely on the dopamine we receive from something in front of us versus something that takes faith. And it's very real. It's harder to rely on our fulfillment and joy and happiness on something that takes faith, because it does take faith. Faith isn't easy. Faith is something you have to take a risk in, because it's not completely guaranteed. It's like, yeah, you're gonna take faith in believing that there is a God who loves us, and obviously that's true. And if you don't believe that's true, that's okay. It takes time for you to develop that faith. For me, it's taken a lot of how God's moved in my life and me just seeing him constantly show up, that I have such a confidence in my own faith for him that it's so hard for me to even question it. There are times when I question that faith, but all that matters is I have that faith, and that's all that God asks of us, is to trust him, trust that he's moving in our lives, because it is this hard to see thing versus this iPad right in front of us. So that's kind of how the enemy is sneaky, is he'll use things right in front of us to pull us away from God, because he knows our human hearts rely on things that are instant gratification. And the idea of instant is right in front of us. It's like right here, right now. That's why social media can be so addicting, and it can be destructive as well. There's this instant lottery machine chemical that goes off in our brain every time we scroll and we swipe, similar to dopamine, similar to serotonin, and it just constantly fuels us to continue scrolling and streaming, and it's because it's addictive. That's how the enemy abuses our human nature or abuses our flesh. With the shopping thing, literally the day of Lent, for me, as I was talking about my struggle with material and shopping, literally the day of Lent, I'll confess, I went to a thrift store to drop off things that Jack and I were donating. We watched on Netflix, there's this like minimalism documentary, and I was like, yes, we are going to become minimalist. We're going to get rid of junk in our lives. We're going to donate it. We literally in our closet have this donation box that we're just going to fill and keep. Once we see something that doesn't add value to our lives, that just means whether it's something we're not using as a utensil, a meaningless decoration, something that we just don't find joy in having in our house, in our home, that we don't even use or think about daily, something that's gathering dust, basically. So we'll just add stuff to that box. Anyways, I went to go drop it off at a thrift store, find myself in the thrift store. Don't know how that happened. Basically walked in. Anyways, went into the thrift store, and I start walking around. Then, boom, I end up with 2 shirts and a pair of pants. How did that happen? Well, guess what? I failed to deny my flesh. Started making justifications in my head. Started saying, oh, I need this. I need this to feel joy. I need this to fill a gap. I need this to fill a purpose. And sure, it felt cool to get a new piece of clothing. Sure, it felt good to not spend a lot on it. But was that filling me spiritually, emotionally, or physically? No. That was a temporary aspect. That was a temporary bout of joy. That wasn't something that's going to sustain me. That piece of clothing is going to rip. That piece of clothing is going to wear. It's going to get stains on it. Probably end up back in the donation bin. So it's just an example that we can lean into our flesh, but it is not going to sustain us forever. I know I keep using the word flesh. Flesh is kind of like your human body. Our human body is this vessel that we have on earth, and our spirit is ourselves, our personality, the light in our life, the light being who we are, our character, who God made us to be, just our spirit in general. You think about, you have a body and then you have a spirit, and whenever we die, our spirit goes up into heaven, and obviously our body stays here, but that spirit gets to live forever in heaven. So that's kind of what I mean when I mention flesh, and I mention, yes, like we're giving into our human bodies and our human desires. Our flesh is linked to sin because it's on earth, and whenever Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, they allowed sin to enter the earth. So I know I keep kind of bouncing around here. There's just so much good stuff to talk about, you guys. I've been learning a lot. I've been passionate about this. Been really just excited to get into the word. It's been really cool to see how God's been moving in my life and to see what he's showing me, and so I just want to share it with you guys. I'm going to read another verse that I read in this morning that was so awesome. Honestly, when I was talking about getting up at 4:30 in the morning, it sounded easy when I just, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning, ran at 5:30. No, not easy. I woke up at 4:30, sat in bed for 5 minutes. I was literally just sitting there dazed, trying and struggling to get out of bed because it was cold and I didn't want to get out of bed because I didn't want to be cold, and it was just easier to stay in bed. And then I remembered that there's these girls waiting on me to meet them to run, and I was like, okay, I gotta get up. So there was that internal struggle of wanting to be comfortable, wanting to be warm. But once I got out, once I ran, I finished my run at 6:40. I had the whole morning to myself. It was awesome. I don't regret doing that. It's just so crazy to me how when you take that step of discipline, even though it's hard and it is really painful in the moment, how that discipline can bring us joy. I think of discipline as something that in the moment is just super hard. But when we think about it, it's so rewarding once you discipline yourself. You go through something hard, you work really hard for something, and then on the other end, there's that reward of, wow, I did that. You think about any time you've done a race. For me, I know I can relate to that. Whether you've maybe worked really hard on a team, if you've done basketball, if you've done soccer, and then you scored so many goals, or I don't know other sport lingo. I don't know other sport stuff. But regardless, you work hard for something, the reward is what you've achieved from that hard work, because the hard work is meant to lead to something. And it's cool because you've disciplined yourself to achieve that end goal and that end reward. Guess what happens after that? You can work hard. You can work towards another hard goal, something that seems unachievable. Our minds set such a minimal standard for things when in reality we have such a big capability of achieving things greater than we can even fully see, which is crazy. And that's why I think discipline is so powerful, because we can say, hey, I want to start getting up at 5 in the morning and doing 30 push-ups and then going to the gym and then doing cardio for 3 hours. And that might seem super unachievable. I'm not saying that's an actual thing that you should do. I'm just saying this is an example of something really hard. Our brains will tell us, no, I can't do that. I can't wake up at 6. I can't wake up at 5. What do you mean? routine. Well, when we do that, we're limiting ourselves. We're not even allowing ourselves the chance to discipline us. We're just saying, oh yeah, I can't do that. I'll just settle for the next best thing. And sure, you can call that discipline too, but you won't have that same rewarding feeling of pushing yourself and seeing what that does whenever you work hard for that goal. And I'm going to see a ton of that once I'm a track coach this season and I coach the girls and I'm there watching them doing these hard workouts and I'm encouraging them, I'm cheering them on, I'm pushing them, and then I see them PR and get their best record ever of the season at meets and races. And I'm so excited for that because I'll get to see it from an external view of watching these girls work for something, feeling that joy from obtaining that goal, and then doing it all over again. God allows us to do that because He wants us to see how much joy we get through discipline. I think Christ gives us discipline as a way to feel joy and peace through Him because it leads us and it points us to Him. It also is for the betterment of ourselves. When we're disciplined, it protects us from things that are useless and not even worth achieving, and it points us to something that is fulfilling and long-lasting and rewarding. But I have a few verses I'm going to read just because they remind me of it. I read in Hebrews 12 this morning. It says, if you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more to subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best for them. But He disciplines us for our good, that we may share in His holiness. So that was Hebrews 12, 8 through 10. I read through that and that was just like, whoa. It just talked all about discipline and how it's good. God talks about discipline and He meant it to be good for us. The world's perception of discipline is, oh, it's hard, it's bad. But whenever you lean into it, it leads to something good and something encouraging. Another verse that I really loved also in Hebrews 12 is, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. But later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained in it. So that's Hebrews 12:11. Such a fire verse. I read in that and I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a perfect example of what discipline is meant to do. Discipline is meant to be hard. The rewarding aspect is the peace that we get because we are choosing that peace over the chaos and the calamity of choosing things of the world that are just pouring into ourselves and are bringing us temporary pleasure. And we see so often around us examples of that. Even Michael Phelps, for example, he probably has the most gold medals, probably the most decorated Olympic athlete in the world. I'm sure he would tell you that he constantly strives for more. He's retired and he probably struggles with peace. Now, I don't know if he's a Christian. I don't know where his heart is with that. But what I do know is I'm sure that he would tell you that him reaching all of those gold medals doesn't bring him fulfillment. Even Tom Brady was in an interview, talks about how he got all the Super Bowl rings that he wanted and he kept striving for more and he wasn't ever fully fulfilled, which shows you he was at the top of the top in terms of his athleticism, in terms of his career. Even then he hadn't felt content. It's just interesting because we see these people in the world that have basically done all the things that we think will give us fulfillment and joy. They've had the most money, they've had the most success, they've had the most rewards and worked hard in the most athletic way, and even then they're still not fully content. If that's not an example of how Christ is the only thing that will fill us, then I don't know what is. Anyways, I'm gonna quit rambling. I feel like I've talked a lot in circles, but I just get really excited and I get really ramped up when I talk about this stuff. Anyways, that's kind of all that I've been kind of learning about Lent. Things that I've been thinking about during Lent. Constantly just trying to point myself to God, go to Him in prayer. I've been journaling a lot. It is really hard to deny things that I want. I'll be at the store getting groceries, end up in the clothing aisle, and I'll have to redirect. Target is dangerous to me. I cannot be in Target, cannot be in Petco either because, oh man, I'm a dog mom. Speaking of, Koa is at training school right now. She'll come back in a week or so, but I miss her so much. Jack and I just have her as our lock screens right now so that when we open our phones she's the first thing we see. But we look around the house and we're like, oh, I miss her. We'll see her hair on clothes that we hadn't washed yet. We're like, oh, Koa. So she'll be back soon enough, but definitely miss her. I don't know how whenever I'm a parent one day I'm gonna be okay sending my kid to school, but it will happen. This is God training me for that, but it is hard and I miss her. I'm excited for her to be back and train super well. Hopefully she's not biting everything anymore, but who knows? She's a dog and she's not perfect, so she'll mess up and we'll love her either way. But that's Koa update. It is hard to deny yourself of things that you want in the moment. It is going to be so much more rewarding and peaceful when you realize that when you have God, that is all that you need. That's all that's going to fill you at the end of the day. So I hope that this was encouraging. I hope this motivated some of y'all to get disciplined about something, to have a goal, to sacrifice something for Lent if you haven't done that before, and rely on God at the end of the day, because He's the only one that is going to bring you peace around all of the chaos in this world. And especially in our world, there's so much noise. Definitely take time to be still, rest in Him, and He will provide you with peace. On that note, I'm going to end this out. Hope you guys have a great day. I am going to be sharing some training updates with running in the next episode. I think my mileage jumped up a lot this week from that new training group, but it is really fun being a part of a little running club. It's unaffiliated, which is also nice. We're just meeting up, running. There's different age groups, which is nice, but I'm just excited to be running with people again. I've been running on my own for a while, and I'm excited to have more community outside of work and my friends, so I'm definitely really grateful for meeting those ladies on that run. But I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Enjoy the weather. Stay warm if it's cold. And yeah, thanks for letting me share my thoughts on things I've been thinking. I have a lot of thoughts. So stay tuned to hear more of those thoughts, because that's what this podcast is about, being real with y'all. I love y'all. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.